And we are live. Caught you drinking, Christy.
It was just water.
I love it. Sure, it's just water. Okay, guys, we're back. Welcome back to Enlightened Health and Healing, where Dr. Christy and I are talking about topics and ideas and our experiences surrounding the four major areas of health: physical, emotional, spiritual, and I'm missing one. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And we have a big topic. I think that this one actually is a big hitter for both Christy and I as it relates to advocating for yourself. Because I have three major life experiences that I've had that have really, and I'm sure if I wanted to, I could think of more than that, but there's three that for me come to mind immediately when I think of this topic. But before we dive in, Christy, how's your day?
Fantastic. How is your day?
My day is fantastic as well. Thank you for asking. Okay, talking about advocating for ourselves. Christy, where would you like to start? You want to start with an
Oh,
example?
sure. So this one comes up a lot for me just in the work that I do every day. So I I have patients that come in very, very frequently that have been to doctors of all kinds. Literally, they've been dealing with some kind of health problem for the better part of a decade. And they come in with a laundry list of medications and a long list of CT scans and MRI results and all these things that have been done. And they feel like they're at the end of their rope and they don't know what to do anymore. And then they end up in my office and we kind of unravel everything. And sometimes it's not always, and I should say it's actually very rarely, quote unquote, easy. But it's really alarming and heartbreaking to me very, very frequently to hear these stories all the time of physicians who just aren't listening to their patients. And sometimes it's more obvious than one would think. Like I've had people before where, they've gone through this and just like the example that I kind of described. And all it takes is changing up one little thing in their diet or adding one supplement or removing something. And most of what they're dealing with goes away.
Yeah, I think that certainly that's a key with all of us, right? Like when we're interacting with other people and just getting to know kind of those simple things that we could do to unravel, right? And the things that we're being told. You bring up a really interesting point, and if I'd love to come back to it, if you don't mind, because I think all of this is going to tie together as it relates to what I heard in that was what other people are telling you to do, right? What you're being told by doctors to do.
Right.
Do you mind if I come back to that one, Kirsty? There's
I said a lot in there and I realized it wasn't very coherent. And so we'll break it down.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful because it actually ties directly back to my three big examples. And I'm going to share that with everyone to give you all of you perspective. Guys, when I was young, I was in fourth grade when I was diagnosed with epileptic blackouts. Now, I won't go into all the details, but the net of it is they put me on a pretty strong drug called Depakote, which for children especially, that can really mess with the chemistry of your body and overall development. And I can tell you for 5 years, I was on that drug. And when I was in ninth grade, I was a stand for myself finally, because the whole time I know that I was telling my parents, like, I don't need this. There's nothing wrong with me. Hello, I'm a dreamer. I love going off in far spaces and dreaming big and getting creative. And I was a stand for myself, and I dumped the pills down the garbage disposal. And my mom took me back to the doctor. Doctor said, "You're cured. There's nothing wrong with you anymore." Go figure. The second one for me was cancer. For about a year and a half, I had been in and out of doctors. And one doctor after another said, "It's all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you." And again, everything serves purpose, right? So there's no judgment in any of this. But for me, I knew to my core being that there was something going on wrong with me. And finally, thankfully, an MA found a tumor in my throat. I knew. And then the third, and I'll come back to all of this, the third big one for me was just recently. And Chris, you are very familiar with this one. I had been, again, post-cancer, I have no thyroid. And I'll be forever on thyroid meds. And I knew, I just had the inkling that something has not been right with one of the meds that I've been on. And I made the choice to stop taking it about 5 weeks ago. And I can tell you, I feel fantastic. I'm starting to feel better than I have in years. And all along, my body's been telling me, like, this isn't right for you. So now tying all those three together, and Christy, with what you first brought up, for me, it comes to being the listening for me. Really getting in tune to, we know our bodies. We know better than anyone that we're not feeling good, or that something isn't feeling right, or that something is going in the wrong direction. And I think that for me, as I look to this topic, it's first just getting to know, like, what feels most right for you. Thoughts on any of that, Christy?
I love all of it. A lot of things came to me when you were saying all that. And so I'm just trying to think. The first thing I wanted to say was, I've got similar stories within my own history that if I didn't know what I knew and do what I do and kind of have the background that I have, I guarantee by this stage in my life, I would be on probably 5 medications by now.
Yep.
And thinking really through that, it's actually really, really frightening. Like, I had an experience when I was in my mid-20s, after trying to come off of the birth control pill. My cycles got all kinds of wonky, and they told me, oh, well, you just have PCOS, so you can just get back on the pill and start taking this other medication. And I was like, yeah, no, because I do eventually want to have kids, and I'm not diabetic. The medication they were recommending was for someone with diabetes. And I was like, yeah, I'm not diabetic. So I'll just take it from here and do some of the things that I know and see where it goes. I mean, we don't always know how things are going to turn out, but sometimes with your own body, you just have to try a couple of things, trust yourself, educate yourself on other ends of what else could be possible, and run with it and see what happens. And in that next year, or actually it was like in the next 3 months, I brought my cycle back regularly. And it was the next year that I got pregnant, not even trying, when they were telling me that there were chances of infertility with this condition they were labeling me with. And it's like, it breaks my heart to honestly think that so many people deal with that and don't know, they don't necessarily have the resources to think there might be other ways. And just like you said, like, just really truly finding your voice and standing up for yourself and saying, what if I want to try something different?
Right.
And going from there and trusting yourself through that process.
Right. Well, it's being the stand for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's being the stand, like, for example, the three things that I mentioned. It's, I knew it. My innate structure said, ding, 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 something's wrong in all of these. And once I listened, and again, for the 2 meds, just completely let them go, my body actually resonated in a really positive, good, healthy way. And guys, I'm not saying go off your meds. I'm not saying don't work with your doctors. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is if something's making your body not feel good, whether it's a medication or a food or a person in your life or an environment you're in, pay attention to it. And pay attention to say, ooh, something's not making me feel good. What is that? And what do I need to change? Because this is, for me, as I look at this topic, it's way bigger than just the medications or the stuff we put into our body.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, it's way bigger than just medication. The one thing I was going to say when we were still on that topic is just reiterating, of course, I would never be an advocate telling people to get off their meds without consulting their physician first. It can be a very delicate thing sometimes, and depending on what it is, if you're interested in getting off of something, it's appropriate to wean down sometimes. And there's a lot that goes into that. So definitely check with your physician if you are on anything that you'd like to get off of. And in doing so, if you're interested in getting off of it, just approach it as a conversation and saying, look, doctor, you know, I've been doing some of my own research. I want to try this and this and this for this different condition. I've read that this might help. What are your thoughts? I'd like to work with something, and just be that stand. But sometimes going off certain medications just cold turkey can be really alarming to your system and problematic. So just wanted to throw that out there.
100%. As I mentioned, not saying that.
Yeah.
And I think tying to all of what you just said, Christy, it's having the facts to say, since I started doing X, Y has been happening. It's the facts to say, here's the side effects that I've been feeling and seeing in myself and my body, and having those kind of conversations to say what's next, because something's not making me feel the right way. Again, whether that be a thing, person, whatever it is.
Right. And honestly, that doesn't always mean that it wasn't the right thing for you at the time.
Right.
But sometimes things just run their course and you no longer need something today that you did 3 years ago.
Right.
And constantly reevaluating where you are at mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, nutritionally, all of it together impacts
Right.
you differently today than it may have in years past when something was recommended. And revisiting that on occasion is not only advised, but I think very recommended and healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, keeping it more broad and just staying more broad picture. So let's talk about for advocating for ourselves, right? Like when I look at advocating for ourselves, the very first thing that comes to my mind is, what do you want to feel like? What feels good to you? And knowing, I know that I say it a lot, but knowing that aligned of what your good state is, what feels good to you. Because when we know what feels good to us, we can know, okay, if I'm going into this job every day and it's making me feel like this and this, why is that happening? So that to me would be the next step, to say, okay, I know that this is when I feel my best, and I know this is when I'm at my best. And then I go into the situation and here's all the things that I feel in that situation. And that for me is where that advocating comes into play. That for me is when I think that we have the opportunity to say, okay, when I go into this job or whatever it is, and I feel heightened emotionally, I feel stressed, my blood pressure goes up, I can't quite get the right focus. It's taking that step back and saying, why is this happening, first of all? And then perhaps having, in this particular situation, if it's dealing with another person or in a work environment, it's having those conversations to say, here's what's happening, here's what I'm feeling in this situation. What can we do differently to honor both of us, or to honor the situation? Again, I'm looking a little bit more broad on this part,
Yeah.
because depending on what type of conversation, communication, it could vary greatly.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, in this topic, my brain, just in what I deal with all the time, goes towards being your own health advocate in those situations. And I 100% agree with everything you just said, because what that brings up for me a little bit is just not only the knowing of who you are, but knowing what you want and not being afraid to be true to
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
That, I mean, we've had those conversations in the past. That for myself, I have a very difficult time, because for my whole life, pretty much, I would default to what the group that I was with would want, and I would ignore my own wants and desires, to the point that I wouldn't even, when someone would ask me, what do you want to do, I wouldn't even have an answer. And so I think it's all in the same conversations of really just, once again, the knowing who you are, what makes you feel your best, and being a stand for that.
Right.
And not being a stand for that in a selfish, nasty kind of way, because of course,
No.
there's some times where you kind of have to do what is appropriate in a certain situation. um, and sometimes if that kind of thing isn't there, or doesn't necessarily matter, it's okay to be an advocate for yourself for what you want, if it's not going to hurt anybody.
Right. No, I agree with you. Christy, as you, all beautiful points. Thank you. And as you mentioned all of that, the thing that I wrote down and comes to my mind is, I don't think people always know how to communicate and advocate for themselves,
Mm.
because I don't think we're taught. I don't think we're always taught how to,
Mm.
for sake of a better word, stick up for yourself.
Hmm.
And how to, because it's all tied together. Okay, so this is beautiful. So when we think about it, when we think about communication and when we think about learning that piece, it all also comes down to confidence and belief in yourself. Confidence and belief to say, okay, yeah, I can trust that this is how I feel, and it's okay for me to say that. But then, like I said, it's learning how to engage that conversation in a way that honors you, while also not I mean, let's look at relationships, for example. If it's in a relationship conversation, that's honoring yourself and your feelings and where you're at without making blame on that other person.
Yeah, you had a lot of really good points in there. Beautifully said. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We're not taught that, nor do we actually actively teach that. I guess, is that something that we just, is one of those learning from experiences kinds of things? Or how can we help teach that forward? I'm thinking from my kid's standpoint, like how to stand up for yourself without being a bully, how to stand up for yourself without coming across in a negative, demeaning, bossy, selfish kind of way. Like because there's a balance there.
Right. I think first and foremost, and this is a bigger picture answer, but I think first and foremost, it's doing more to teach people at a younger age. It's actually classes in school for kids to actually learn how to communicate. But that's a whole different dynamic and bigger question. But I think it's allowing the messiness of learning how to have a voice, especially when I think of for parents, well, even for relationships, even for friendships. I mean, I think it's in all spectrums. It's with the sphere of people who are in your world. It's allowing all of them to say, "All right, bring it. What's got you going on? What's," and not making it wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
however it comes out, letting it come out however it does. And I think that that's how we learn. I mean, that's, if I really look at it, that's how I originally learned how to be a manager, is just by doing, and a lot of mistakes, a lot of lessons. And then, of course, later in life, then there's leadership trainings and things like that that I engaged with. But it wasn't until, I don't think I took my first leadership related class until I was early 20s, mid 20s. And by then, we are so formed in certain behaviors, communication wise, that we still yet don't know, aside from what we've seen and what we've learned from experience.
Yeah. I totally had a thought and I didn't write it down, so it's gone. Because I was so interested in hearing what you were saying. I'll come back. I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point. Yeah, this is a really interesting one, especially just in the teaching of it. I keep going back to like, how do I teach this to my kids kind of perspective. In Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to try and think of what else, if you have something else to say. Well, I try and think of what I was going to say.
Okay, so staying on that point, because maybe it'll spark something. I think that for any parent, it's first, it's letting your kids have their perspective. I think back to when Bo was growing up, and it was just listening. It was listening to his way of folding the towel. It was listening to, I know not everyone will get that, but it's listening to, they may have a different way than us as well, and they may have a different
Right.
perspective. And I think the more that we allow that, the more that someone can actually step into advocating for themselves, because they know that their voice matters.
Right. That was, you definitely brought it up for me. So what I wrote down is, it is that other person's perspective, but sometimes that can be challenging because what we say impacts another person.
Mm.
And they receive it a certain way, whether we meant it in that way or not, sometimes.
Sure.
And depending on how that other individual responds, it can then trigger us in another, kind of way that we then end up not being authentic to ourselves or advocating for ourselves again. And you know what I'm saying? Like, so the dynamic of the communication and the relationship, especially from a kid's perspective, as they're just trying to learn and navigate through this entire mess. I mean, it's hard on adults, I think, sometimes. So to try and teach that at a child's age, where not everyone's at that level of maturity and self-awareness, to not make someone else wrong for a different perspective, and not judge them for their opinions. It's like, oh, well, I want to go play on the swings. Well, I want to go play on the slide. Okay, well, you can do what you want to do and I can do what I want to do, or we could do both. Like, there's all those other options without, I mean, obviously I just threw out a random silly example, but you get the point.
Well, I think that that's part of the learning. Compromise.
Yeah.
Because compromise comes along with, okay, being an advocate. I know that this is a more simple example of going, I want to go play on the swings. You want to go whatever. And it's advocating, saying, no, I'm going to go do this. And I'm totally okay with if we have a moment that we're not together.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is, I think, for me at least, that was really hard for me growing up, is I would rather be with people than do something different that is what I wanted to do.
Mm.
And that's
I
just
was the
me.
opposite. Yeah. I would often, even if I had to be by myself, I honored what I wanted to do. Well, there was a balance though. I was a pretty good negotiator to get people to see things my way, and yeah, interesting. Okay, that's a good conversation.
Nice.
Okay, so
No.
back to the topic at hand, bigger picture. So relationships, advocating for yourself in relationships. Same concept, right? Like listen to the other side while also honoring where you're at and your perspectives. So when I look at all of this and when we talk all of this through, I think the main thing that really kept hitting for me is the importance from a health perspective of why to advocate for yourself and why it's important and why we want to do this for ourselves. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is it feels good. You know, I feel great since I was a stand for myself and let go of one of the medications that I really had. It was making me feel lousy. And now 6 weeks later, I feel so much better and healthier than I have in years. And there's some things that I won't get into that are coming back to me that I thought, well, I'm just getting old. Well, it wasn't an old thing. It was a medication thing. And you know, even if I look at that, I could bring in another example of when I was at the company that I used to work for and different examples there. So I think for me, it comes across all levels, but tying it all back in, it comes down to feeling good in life for me.
Yeah,
Mentally, emotionally, all spectrums.
I agree 100%. Of course, it feels empowering. It feels really good to be in that space. And I'd love to hear you talk about this part because I have it that you'll say things a bit more elegantly than I would. From my standpoint, and I know your standpoint as well, it's a third chakra conversation of making sure that you feel self-expressed and that you're channeling everything that's really truly within yourself. And when that area is blocked, if you're not communicating freely of what you truly believe and what you truly want, that can get blocked, and it can lead to obviously just in that sense not feeling great in your body, but it can lead to all sorts of other things.
Yeah. Well, and we know my example, right? Like I didn't always honor my voice for years, decades actually. And mine showed up as dis-ease, a tumor in my throat. I certainly believe that when we don't honor ourselves emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, in any of those capacities, and we're consistently putting our body at odds and our emotions at odds to say, I really want to be doing this, but I'm really doing this. We do that for too long, and our bodies, it's going to take a toll on our body.
Yeah.
Whether it be through fatigue, whether it be through dis-ease or disease, whether it be cancer or, excuse me, something else. Excuse me.
Yeah.
It will often show up in different areas.
Right.
Yeah.
I find your body will manifest things until you get the message.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had that conversation with my son, my oldest, especially. And everyone constitutionally is a little bit different, and certain things will show up in your body. I find naturally, given how you generally manifest something. So, for instance, like some people are like a headache person. When their body's under stress or they're experiencing X, Y, or Z, they're going to get a headache. Or some
Yeah.
people are more geared towards getting stomach aches or what have you. My oldest he gets a sore throat. And I know it like clockwork when he's had a rough day or a rough weekend, and you can tell he's just been more agitated. Next day he'll have a sore throat, and that wasn't a huge deal years ago, but now with COVID, that becomes a big problem when he can't go to school for 3 days because he had a sore throat for 3 hours because he didn't let emotions from a weekend incident
Mm-hmm.
go before coming into the week. So It's been a lot of conversations on that to make sure that he understands himself enough to know that he can express certain things in a healthy way so that they don't impact his body.
Yeah, you had a couple really good nuggets and things in there that I want to circle back to, because I think that so many people get impacted in throat and in voice and in being seen, heard, and understood, because it is such a big thing. And really, to your point, not only does it impact our fifth chakra, but also our solar plexus, our ego and our self-expression. But it's interesting, and one of the things that you said, and I won't get it exactly right, but it was in the way he said something. The way that you said it is expressing it in a, I forget the word that you used, way. And that's for me where I've really come to grips on the fact of sometimes there's not a right way. And sometimes it just needs to come out however it comes out.
That's true.
And it's honoring, I tell all my clients all the time, because I have a couple who actually, the best thing that they can do is we hop on screen and they'll get all their anger out. And they'll get it all out at me, and that's fantastic because it needs to come out. And if we don't know, if we don't have that safe space that we can just say, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, those are all real feelings. And those are all feelings that we're taught are wrong and bad. And we need to make them right. And we need to honor to say, okay, you're mad, you're angry, get it out. Let's go. Talk about it. And then once you do, often in just that letting it out, everything's more clear. And then you can actually really quickly get back to balance. And often you realize that things aren't as big as you thought that they were.
Yeah, I 100% agree. On my son's example, I used the word in a healthy way because what I was referring to there is communicating it somehow, however it looks, not hitting your brother when you're angry kind of scenario.
Yeah.
But in also the other things that you were saying, I've said that to patients very frequently, that there are no wrong emotions. Like, all emotions are good. They're all healthy to experience. Some of them just have a certain feeling in your body that you don't want to continue ruminating with and living there, because they can cause disease in our bodies, right? So the emotions of fear and anger and resentment and sadness, there's nothing wrong with any of them.
Right.
And at the same time, if we live there and never let go of those emotions, they can cause a lot of negativity in ourselves.
Yeah, always have to process them. That's 100% agreed. So something just came to me, and I'm going to let you talk for a minute because it'll come back to me in just a second, because it escaped me and then it'll come back. It really comes back to not ignoring, when I think of advocating for yourself, it's not ignoring what you have going on and not minimizing, saying, here's the way that I think, here's the way that I feel. It's not minimizing that. It's taking an honest look to say, ooh, this doesn't feel right. I need to do something about it. I need to say something about it. I need to take action in some way. That to me is how I really look at advocating for yourself.
That was really, really beautifully said. I wrote that down specifically because that line that you just said actually connects all of it, from the health and like medication and doctor conversation perspective to the relationships to all of it. And what you said was the not ignoring what you have going on, or not ignoring what comes up for you.
Yeah.
And how many of us ignore stuff constantly? Yeah. I live and breathe this all the time, and I ignore stuff in myself all the time. I mean, quite frankly, you call me out on it. All right, Christy, what do you have going on right now? And I was like, oh shoot, I didn't think about it. Because sometimes we get so used to stuffing stuff because it's not the right time to bring it up, or we are afraid of how someone will receive something, or, oh, this person is a doctor, so they must know more than me, so I'll just let it go.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with, at the very least, bringing it up to a conversation so that it can be cleared, and then you might have better clarity on whatever's going on your end, in that not ignoring it.
And it could be bringing it up to yourself. Because I think sometimes it's just that imposter limiting belief or whatever it is saying, I'm here still. And you just got to say, yeah, no, you can keep going.
Yes.
So there's that too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the not ignoring a piece, we can overthink that. Not that I've ever done that before.
Never.
But in the sense of if something comes up for you, we can take it and jump down a rabbit hole and inquire too much when it's not necessary to overthink things. It's just, okay, something's come up, give it attention and move on. And it's in the practice, I think, of figuring out when we need to dig on something and bring it up to someone else, or when we can just more easily move on from it.
Yeah, 100% agree. I love it. Okay, advocating for yourself. We talked about the benefits. We talked about, well, you didn't really touch on why, but I think that for me, as I look at the why, it's your health. It's being in your best emotion that you choose. You know, if you want to live in happiness and joy, it's advocating for yourself to be in happiness and joy. Whether that be, and I think that the other thing that I recognize in all of this is it's also being the advocate to yourself. Because I think that at times we can even argue with ourselves internally. And it's even that self advocate to say, yeah, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to build the confidence, or I'm going to learn the communication, I'm going to learn the thing because it's really what I want. And it's that self drive, self strength, self push, self advocate, even internally, so that you don't give up on yourself.
I wrote down a couple of things. So that was really, really good in being an advocate to yourself. I don't do that enough. What's that?
For yourself, to yourself. Yeah.
For yourself, to yourself. Yeah, I totally don't do that enough. And what came up for me as you were saying something is just recognizing what you want. Like, I want to be in joy and happiness. I want to be in that state. And quite frankly, sometimes I don't think people want to be in that state, but we feel like we should.
Yep.
Or it would be better in the situation if I just faked it. And so it's once again in that conversation of not ignoring what you've got going on and respecting where you're at and honoring what you want in a moment, while not letting yourself sit in, a miserable place. Sometimes you just need to exist and allow the feelings to be before forcing something else.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with 100%. Sometimes we all have a sad day or an emotional day, and that's okay. And it's not making that wrong and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts, Christy, on advocating for yourself on any spectrum?
I think we touched on most everything. Did we touch on the how enough? Like, I know it mostly comes from once again, knowing who you are, creating that self-awareness to know what you want so that you can step into that space. But do you have any tips and thoughts on when it's uncomfortable, how to bring those things up in relationships or with your doctor, for instance, if you don't feel, from a doctor and like from a health perspective, I've often said, like, if your doctor doesn't want you to get a second opinion, that's kind of an issue. Like, I very, very frequently will tell people, like, do all the research you want, look this up, Google this, talk to your other doctor about it. And if you got more questions, come back to me. Like, that's the kind of stuff I want them to engage, because it means that they're taking a stand for themselves and their own health, as opposed to just taking my word for it, you know? And so in some of those conversations, I try to facilitate empowering them in that place so they can have those conversations if they're uncomfortable. But what thoughts do you have on making it more comfortable to engage those things if they've never done so before?
Yeah, the very first thing that comes to my mind is gaining trust in yourself, because it is a self-confidence piece.
Yeah.
It is the self-trust to say, no, here's what I'm feeling. I'm going to trust that. I'm going to trust that this isn't okay. I'm going to trust myself enough to say, I don't deserve this, no matter what the spectrum is. And then it's taking action, whether that be through communication. It may mean, the way that I look at it is, you may need help. You may need help to learn how to communicate your feelings and not back down, I guess is the best way I can say it. And if you need that kind of help, get help, whether it be through a coach or a friend or another physician or someone else important in your life that will help be an advocate for you so that you can learn how to be that for yourself. And then I had another thought. How else can we advocate for ourselves? Yeah, those are the big ones. Trust yourself. Oh, again, it's the knowingness of what you want. I mentioned it early on. it's a knowingness of like, no, here's what I want for my life, and I'm not going to let anyone stop me from getting that, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I love it. Beautifully said.
Thanks. Any other tips, questions, or thoughts?
I think that's most of what I had.
Yeah.
This is a big topic for me, and especially just on the health side of things, because I see this all the time. And like I said, like it frustrates me sometimes to hear how people aren't listened to when they've got something medically going on. And the thing is, it's like, and this is why I bring up like getting second opinions or trusting yourself and asking more questions and that sort of thing, because physicians are humans too. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all drop the ball on things. And so if you blindly trust whatever your doctor is telling you without making sure it feels right within yourself, or just doing some experimenting on your own, both of you could be missing something.
Yeah, there's something that you mentioned that sparked something for me is look at the way you're communicating it to that person, because they might not be hearing you.
Yeah.
Especially, I think that I'm a very literal thinker. If someone comes in sideways, I might not catch it. I mean, if you Oreo cookie with me, not going to work. Give it to me straight. And I think there's people try being so kind, and I love kindness and I love respect, because those are key values for me. And sometimes we take things in a soft way, but you know what? Sometimes when you're advocating for yourself, you have to say, look, here's how I'm feeling. This isn't okay. Because otherwise, the person receiving it may not hear you. They may not understand the seriousness of where you're at, whether that be a practitioner or in a relationship or what have you. So be really, really clear of how you think and feel, whatever that thing is that you're advocating for.
Yes. 1,000 times yes on that.
Yeah. Because I really, really believe that any practitioner, no matter what their profession, whether they're a doctor or a holistic or Western, or they're a coach or whatever they are, I really believe that anyone in this profession is aimed at doing their best for people. And I love to think that no one would just blindly disregard someone else and where they're at in their journey.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Sometimes different practitioners, I never believe there's malicious intent.
Yeah.
I also just know that sometimes there's just we're in where we are.
Yep.
I'm in my holistic bubble, and so
Yep.
I might miss the fact that someone needs a medication, whereas someone else might miss the fact that they don't need a medication. And so we all have our blind spots, and that's why trusting yourself and pushing for what you think is appropriate and just having those conversations is important.
100% agreed. Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts before we wrap things up?
That was good. I like that conversation.
Yeah, I like the conversation too.
If anyone has any questions, whether not, I mean, I don't know who's watching now, but especially on the replay, I'd love some comments, because I feel like this could go in a lot of different directions as well.
Yeah, agreed. Good. Guys, as always, if you're ever finding yourself in that space that you're struggling and you just need help, just know you're not in it alone. There's always the hotline. There's always different sources that you can reach out to. And always feel free to reach out to myself or Dr. Christy for coaching or holistic practitioner support. We would love to be here to support you in any way that we can on your journey. So with that being said, next week, we're going to be off for Christmas for the holidays. And we will see you guys back in undecided. Christy, are we going to be back the week of New Year's, or are we coming back the first week of January?
Good question. Is in 2 weeks from now. I'm just trying to look at the calendar super quick if I can look at that.
2 weeks.
That's New Year's Eve. I think
Eve.
we could do a fun show on like resolutions or something
Oh,
on goal
love
setting
it.
or something like that, just off the top of my head.
So we will see you guys right back here on New Year's Eve. Have a very Merry Christmas, and yeah, have a great weekend.
Sounds great.
Thanks, guys.